My name is Robert. I'm 80 years old, and I've been thinking about a Tuesday in March 1987. It wasn't a special day. There was no tragedy, no accident, nothing anyone would remember. But I do, because that was the day I chose wrong. And I've spent 37 years understanding what that meant. I don't know why I'm recording this now. Maybe because I'm running out of time to say it. Maybe because I've finally understand it well enough to put into words. Or maybe because I just need to say it out loud once before I go. I was 43 that year. My daughter Sarah was 16. My son Michael was 13. My wife Anne and I had been married for 18 years. We lived in a house on Maple Street, 3 bedrooms, a backyard with a fence that needed painting, a kitchen table where we ate dinner most nights, though not always together. I worked in insurance, commercial policies mostly. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. Anne worked part-time at the library. She loved it there, said it was the quietest place in the world. I remember thinking our life was fine. Not perfect, but fine. And on that Tuesday in March, I made a choice that seemed small at the time. I didn't know it would become the thing I'd carry for the rest of my life. It started at breakfast. Anne was at the counter pouring coffee. Sarah was rushing around looking for a textbook. Michael was eating cereal, half asleep. I was reading the newspaper. Anne said something to me. I don't remember what it was exactly. Something about the weekend, maybe about visiting her mother, or fixing the gutter, or something we needed to talk about. I nodded. I didn't look up. She said my name. Robert. I said, "Mm-hmm." She stood there for a moment. I could feel her standing there. Then she said, "Never mind," and she walked out of the kitchen. I kept reading the paper. I went to work, came home around 6. Anne had made dinner, chicken, I think, maybe rice. We sat down. The kids talked about school. I asked Michael about his math test. Sarah said something about a friend. Anne was quiet. I noticed, but I didn't ask. After dinner, I went into the living room and turned on the TV. Anne stayed in the kitchen, cleaning up. I heard the water running, the clink of dishes. And then I heard her stop. I don't know how long she stood there, but the water had turned off, and the house was quiet, and I could feel her standing still in the other room. I thought about getting up. I thought about walking into the kitchen and asking if she was okay, but I didn't. I told myself she was fine. I told myself I was tired. I told myself it wasn't a big deal, and I stayed on the couch. That was the moment. That was the choice. I don't think Anne and I ever talked about that night, not directly, but something shifted after that. Not at once, not in a way anyone else would have noticed, but I noticed. She stopped saying my name the same way. She stopped waiting for me to look up. She stopped standing in doorways hoping I'd ask. And I told myself it was normal. I told myself marriage was like this, comfortable, routine. I told myself we were fine. The years went by. Sarah went to college. Michael followed a few years later. The house got quieter. Anne and I were alone more often. And I started to realize how little we had to say to each other. We'd sit at dinner, just the two of us, and the silence felt heavy. Not angry, not cold, just empty, like we'd run out of words a long time ago and never noticed. I remember one night, maybe 5 or 6 years after that Tuesday. We were sitting in the living room. Anne was reading. I was watching TV. She closed her book. She looked at me, and she said, "Do you ever think about us?"
I didn't know what she meant. I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Us, you and me. Do you ever think about who we are now?" I didn't know how to answer that. I said, "We're fine, aren't we?" She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "I don't know." And she went upstairs. I sat there on the couch, staring at the TV, and I told myself she was just tired. I told myself it would pass, but it didn't. Over the next few years, Anne started doing things on her own. She joined a book club, started going to yoga, spent more time with her friends. I told myself it was good for her. I told myself she needed her own life. But the truth was, I didn't know how to be part of it. I didn't know how to ask. And so I didn't. In 2003, Anne's mother passed away. Anne took it hard. I went to the funeral. I stood next to her. I held her hand. But I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to comfort her. So I just stood there. And when we got home, she went into the bedroom and closed the door. I stood outside for a moment. I thought about knocking. I thought about sitting with her. But I didn't. I went downstairs and turned on the TV. A few months later, Anne told me she wanted to take a trip. Just her, by herself. She said she needed some time to think about things. I said, "Okay." I didn't ask what she needed to think about. I didn't ask if I could come with her. I just said, "Okay." She went to Vermont for a week. When she came back, she seemed different, calmer, quieter, but also further away. I think that's when I started to understand. Not all at once, not in a clear, sudden way, but slowly. I started to see all the moments I'd missed, all the times she'd tried to reach me and I'd stayed on the couch, all the times she said my name and I hadn't looked up, all the small choices I'd made without realizing they were choices. And I started to understand what I'd done. Not in one moment, but in 1,000. In 2008, Sarah got married. It was a beautiful wedding. Anne planned most of it. I walked Sarah down the aisle, and at the reception, I watched Anne dance with Michael. She was smiling, laughing. She looked happy. But when she looked at me, the smile faded a little. Not in a mean way, not in an angry way, just tired. Like she'd been waiting for something for a long time and finally stopped waiting. We stayed married. We never talked about separating. We never fought, really. We just existed next to each other. We had dinner together. We went to the kids' houses for holidays. We watched TV in the same room. But we weren't really together. Not in the way we used to be. Not in the way I thought we still were back in 1987. Anne passed away 2 years ago. It was sudden, a stroke. She was in the garden one afternoon, and then she wasn't. I found her there. At the funeral, people said nice things. They said she was kind, thoughtful, warm, and she was. She was all of those things. But I kept thinking about that Tuesday in March. I kept thinking about the moment she said my name, and I didn't look up. I've been alone for 2 years now. The house is the same. The kitchen table is still here. The couch is still in the living room. But it's quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet Anne used to love at the library. The empty kind. I think about that moment a lot. Not because it was dramatic.
My name is Robert. I'm 80 years old. And I've been thinking about a Tuesday in March, 1987. It wasn't a special day. There was no tragedy, no accident, nothing anyone would remember. but I do, because that was the day I chose wrong. And I've spent 37 years understanding what that meant. I don't know why I'm recording this now. Maybe because I'm running out of time to say it. Maybe because I've finally understand it well enough to put into words. Or maybe because I just need to say it out loud once before I go. I was 43 that year. My daughter, Sarah, was 16. My son, Michael, was 13. My wife, Anne, and I had been married for 18 years. We lived in a house on Maple Street. 3 bedrooms, a backyard with a fence that needed painting, a kitchen table where we ate dinner most nights, though not always together. I worked in insurance, commercial policies mostly. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. Anne worked part-time at